Hello friends, welcome to your channel Demystify Frontend, and this is the third video in the series Build Your Own Angular Forms. So if you are new to the channel, let me tell you, we are creating Angular form package from the scratch in this series, and I'll try to let you know the inner details of Angular forms, how Angular form work internally, how it provides different set of directives, services which together gives you a very rich experience in handling your form, in managing your form. Okay, so let's get started. So this is the third video in the series, and in the last two videos what we covered like I gave a brief overview of two-way data binding, what is two-way data binding in general, and how Angular manages two-way data binding through different directives. Okay, and we also created the first version of ngModel directive. And now in this video, we are primarily going to focus on the concept of control value accessor. Like, what is control value accessor? Why do we even require it? Right? What is the purpose of it in the first place? Okay, so let's get started. So let me give you a quick recap. If you have not watched previous two videos, let me give you a quick recap of the code we have written so far. So basically, as we are creating the Angular form package, right? So what I did, so going forward, we will be creating different sort of directives, right? So we have created ngModel, but we will be creating a lot of directives, ngForm, form control. So there are like many directives related to template driven forms and reactive forms. Okay, so what I did in the last videos, I created a form module, right? So this is my form module. Let me show you. So it's a simple module. You know how to write the module, how to write the feature modules, how to import them into the main modules. So this is the forms module which we have created, and this module will hold all your directives, all your services, right? And we can export which we want to expose from this module. And if you go to the app module, it is importing. It includes this forms module and put it into the imports array, so that all the directives, all the services which are exported by this forms module, they are accessible within the module, within your app module. Okay, so this is the directive, right? So what it is about, it takes one input by the name ngModel, and it also gives you one output event. Okay, ngModel change, right? So let's go to the browser. You can see there are a couple of inputs here. Okay, and you can see whatever property we have set here in the component, they are reflecting in the DOM, in the form controls. And even if you make a change here, they are changing accordingly, right? So how it is working, it is like self-explanatory going through this code. If you are aware of Angular, you know how directive, what directive is, how directive works. So this is very simple solution, right? So we define the selector first. Okay, so this is the attribute selector, and then we define one input property and one output event property. Okay, and we inject element reference here. So through element ref we have access to the DOM of the underlying host element. So host element is referred for the element where you apply the directive. So we apply the directive here on the input. So this input element serves as a host element. Okay, so here we can write the value attribute of the host element. So whatever input we provide, we can simply set it on the value attribute. Similarly, if there is a change in the input, like some user typing into the input, we have to emit that change back to the use case component where we apply this directive, so that we achieve it through the host listener. So host listener is the decorator that we use to subscribe to the events on the underlying host element. Okay, so we subscribe to the input event on the host element where we apply the directive that is here on the input, and whenever there is a change, we read the value attribute from the event object. Okay, and we emit it through the update event. And here in the template we subscribe to the ngModel change, and we update the component property accordingly. This is how we achieve two-way data binding. Okay, so this is the recap of what we have done so far. So by now you must have some understanding of like how this directive is working, ngModel directive, right? Okay, so now let me tell you the shortcoming in the solution. So this is very very simple solution. Okay, so this is not something the Angular package should have written like this, right? Because it has to cover a lots of scenarios. It has to work for all the type of form controls, be it input having type text, be it a number input, text input, email input, select box, radio buttons, checkbox, everywhere. Because like you can apply it on every on any of the control, and it track the values and it let you update the value by the property you pass to ngModel. So it enables two-way data binding on each and every type of form inputs. But that's not the case with our solution. So where we are lacking. So first let me show you. So if you see here, these are the normal inputs having type text, right? So these are tracked properly. There is no issue, right? If I type anything here, that is tracked perfectly. But what about this checkbox? Okay, let me toggle it a couple of times. So you can notice there is no change in the hash passport flag, right? So this is the property that we pass to ngModel for this checkbox, right? Let me show you in the code as well. So this is the checkbox input having type checkbox, and here we apply the ngModel and we bind it to the hash passport flag, hash passport. So it's a boolean flag we use here, hash passport, right? So the solution that we created, the ngModel directive which we developed, it's not working, right? It's not working for the controls other than simple inputs having type text, number, email, etc., right? Why it is not working? So that is quite obvious, because our solution is very hard coded to a particular type of input, right? You can see in the ngModel, we are listening to a particular event, input event, right? And we read the value attribute, plus when we write to the host element, we are writing to the value attribute, right? So but that's not the case. That's not the case, because in the form you are dealing with different type of form controls and you write to them in different ways, right? So if you are dealing with checkbox, so we don't write to the checkbox value attribute, rather we use checked property, right? We had to update checked property on that checkbox. Okay, so let me show you. So let me make some updates here to make it more clear, right? So what I was saying, when you have a when you are applying the ngModel on a form element, which is, let's say, checkbox, right? So what, how will you make updates on that checkbox? Through checked property. Similarly, we have to read the checked property and emit whatever state, whatever change is made by the user on the checkbox, right? Similarly, we can listen to the change event instead of the input event, right? Now let's see what. Okay, so now you can observe the two-way data binding is not working for these two simple inputs having type text, but it is working for the checkbox because we made the changes accordingly, right? Now if you toggle it on and off, now it is working fine for the checkbox. So the whole point of discussing this thing is to realize that there are lots of complexities which the ngModel directive takes care of, but we are not aware of it until we go and check into the source code, like how it is dealing with it, right? So this is just two inputs now we are dealing with, right? And we can see the solution is not working, right? But how ngModel makes it working, right? So that is something we are going to discuss today in this video. Okay, so let's go back to the slide now. So how we can manage it, right? So what happens now, like, so instead of tackling with each type of input in the ng model itself, right? Because that now you are aware of, like, if it is a simple input having type text, email, number, then we have to write on the value attribute. If it is a checkbox, we have to write on the checked. Similarly, we can have different other sorts of form controls like select box, radio buttons. So we have to deal with them differently. But that would not be a very good solution, and that won't scale very well if we have all those conditions baked right into the ngModel directive. So what ngModel directive basically does, it introduce one new construct to manage dealing with different type of form controls through one new construct. They call it control value accessor. So this is the complete picture of ngModel, and you can see the related components, the component it interact with behind the scenes. Okay, so until now you must have developed a clear understanding of the ngModel directive on a very high level, how it works and how it implements the two-way data binding, right? So if I move back to the previous slides which we discussed in the last two videos, so here I told you about like how ngModel synchronize the value it accept from the use case component with the host element, right? So how it gets to know about, like, if there is a change done by user on the host element, and how it write to the host element in a correct way, which the host element can understand, like which attribute we should write it to, because we have different type of form controls where we can apply this ngModel directive, right? Like we can apply it on the text, we can apply it on the number input, email input, checkbox, select, multi-select, etc., right? And for, let's say, for the simple inputs, we write to the value attribute. For the checkbox, we write to the checked attribute, right? So now how ngModel gets to know about all these things, how it deals with the complexities, right? So that is something we are going to discuss in this section. Okay, so let's move to the complete picture. So here you can see we have defined some new components which the ngModel interact with. Okay, and so ngModel will manage the complexities related to each host element through some set of directives, and it calls it a control value accessors, right? So control accessors are nothing, these are simple directives which let you subscribe to a particular host element to read the values they emit, and also let you to write to them, right? So we have different type of form controls, and corresponding to these form controls we have specified, and angularform provides some default control value accessors which gets mapped to these form controls when you apply the ngModel directive. So talking about the default control value accessor, right? So where, how it applies, in what cases it gets applied, or which form control it will apply to. So default control value accessor directive will apply on to the simple inputs like text input, number, email inputs, right? And if we use ngModel directive on some other controls like checkbox, then there are specialized control value accessor for that, that is checkbox control value accessor. So now what happens, like when you apply ngModel directive, so it not only create the instance of ngModel directive for that, but it also create one instance of one control value accessor, right? So for the symbol text input, in this case it will create instance of default control value accessor, right? And when the default control value accessor is created, it subscribe to the underlying host element for a particular or for appropriate event through which it can listen for the changes and communicate back to the ngModel, right? Likewise, default control value accessor knows how to write to that particular host element, right, where it get applied. Now when you pass the input in your use case component to the ngModel. So ngModel will pass it on to the default control value accessor, right? So we saw in our solution what we did, we updated the host element directly, right, through by injecting element ref. So element ref, we get hold of the host element DOM and we updated it directly, right? But this is not the correct way ngModel is written, right? If you even if you check the source code, so this is the complete picture uh, through which it manages different form controls, right? So it will not update the host element directly. Instead, it will delegate this responsibility of writing and reading to the host element, right, to the control value accessor directive. So when the input, when the ngModel gets the input, it just pass the input data to the control value accessor corresponding to that host element, right? And that control value accessor instance will write to the host element accordingly, okay? And likewise, when there is a change in the input, when there is a change in the host element, then default control value accessor gets those updates and it will push the updates back to the ngModel, and ngModel can emit the ngModel change event, and component use case component will get the updated value, right? Likewise, if we have if we have another control like checkbox where we apply this directive, so in this case the default control value accessor won't get instantiated here. This checkbox control value accessor gets applied to uh, this checkbox input, right? And again it listen for the change event, so the event can be appropriate to um, the host element where we apply our ngModel directive, right? Since we have different elements who emit different type of events and we write to these form elements in different ways. Sometimes we write to the value attribute, sometimes we write to the checked attribute, or sometimes we write it in another way. So that's why we have different control value accessor which deals with the complexity involved in managing different form controls. Okay, so now the next question can arise in your mind is like how ngModel gets hold of the control value accessor, the correct control value accessor, right, for the host element. So what happens, these are the directives, right, which instantiated based on the like where you apply the ngModel. So what happens when the instance of a particular control value accessor is created, it exposes itself into the DI system of Angular, right? What does that mean? So it exposes itself on a DI token. So it will configure a DI token, that is ngValue accessor. Now the next question that can trouble you is like how ngModel gets hold of this default control accessor, right? So that is made possible through the Angular dependency injection system. So that is something which is playing a very crucial role, right, in the entire Angular form package, because these directives are related. So one directive is accessing another directive and make use of it. So what happens when the default control value accessor or any of the control value accessor instance is created, it configure itself on a DI token. Okay, so let's make it simple for you. The instance of default control value accessor directive is created, it exposes itself. Okay, it exposes itself as a service and it configure this ngValue accessor DI token, right? And ngModel basically inject this token ngValue accessor, and through this token, when it inject this token, it gets hold of this control value accessor directive, right? So that it can call the write value method and write to the underlying host element. Also, it can subscribe uh, to the control value accessor, right? And uh, through that subscription, it can get the future updates, right, from the host element, right? So this is the complete picture. I hope it bring a good clarity, right? Likewise, so this is the case, this is the default control value accessor which gets created for the simple inputs, and if we see if we have a different form control, let's say we have a checkbox, right? So based on the the form element where we are applying the ngModel directive, appropriate control value accessor instance or control value accessor directive instance will be created, right? So in this case we will have checkbox control value accessor, right? So it will work the same. It will also expose itself as a service on the ng value accessor di token, and the ngModel will read that token, and through that it will get access to the checkbox control value accessor, right? So now when it all the ngModel has to do is like simply inject this di token, and it can simply write to the control value accessor, which in turn write to the underlying host element, and it can subscribe to the it can register for the updates from the underlying host element, right? Via default control value accessor. So it acts as a bridge. So the control value accessor acts as a bridge between the ngModel and the underlying host element where we apply the ngModel directive. So thanks for be with me till the last part of the video, and let's see you in the next video where we will be implementing all these directives, control value accessor, right, in the next video, and we will get to know about the implementation.